Everyone, I'm Unique Lamia, also known as Mia, and I'm a dual degree graduate student studying public administration and criminal justice. And in this video, I will be telling you guys about the different eras of policing. It should be noted all the information that I'm telling you are based on textbooks that I have read. I read the whole textbook, and like academic peer-reviewed journal articles and or accredited websites, guys. So when you look at the United States criminal justice system, the system that's set up today isn't the system that always existed, guys, okay? There are different eras of policing. So first we're gonna start, and when I say different eras of policing, we're speaking about quote unquote modern eras of policing. So like when they created the President of the United States, we're working not at the start of that, but in the 1800s, around that era. So first, we're going to start with the political era of policing. So the political era of policing is from the 1840s to the 1930s. And when you watch gangsters, I guess that's what you can say, various gangs, this is the era of policing that you think about. Corrupt police officers, this is the era. So most police officers and organizations were corrupt and worked for politicians in the political era of policing. This means that if a police officer engaged in a community service or activity, essentially such as maybe donating food, donating clothes, having like a community service fun event for residents, it was for the benefit of a political figurehead, such as a senator, a government, or a governor, or another politician for whom they were working for. So these politicians essentially pay the police officers to do these community service activities. And at those community service activities, the police officers would say, make sure you vote for Governor Mia, for example. She's the one who organized this and paid for you to get this. And this is how these individuals got their vote and hence most likely won elections during this era. No separation between the police and individuals that they arrested. So for example, one standard way that police officers completed their job was by conducting foot patrols. And these foot patrols, they essentially walked from the location of the crime to the scene and henceforth. And most of these times, these foot patrols occurred in neighborhoods where the police officers lived. So you're introducing conflict of interest, and we have to remember that this political era of policing was a corrupt era of policing. So quotas was a big thing in the past. That's where you have to arrest like a certain number of individuals. It still exists in modern society, but it is going away a little more. So you never know if like a crime was set up and the police officer just walked over there to meet their quota, or like if they paid somebody to commit a crime and then informed them about it. So there was like no impartiality and no professionalism. But this method of foot patrols, it grew out of slave patrols that existed in the 17th to 18th centuries. And it was mostly these slave patrols and these foot patrols by police officers were mostly controlled by white individuals who had the authority and power to punish, such as beating or injuring enslaved people who they believed had weapons or were walking outside without their owner's permission. So we're gonna deviate a little bit and I'm gonna elaborate on that. So for these foot patrols, an African-American individual who was unfortunately a slave was walking outside or just standing outside of their house, and a white individual passed them on these quote unquote foot patrols. And if the person was like, this is my house right here, I'm just getting some fresh air, they could beat them or like injure them just for that. So this is what these foot patrols grew out of, and it was implemented into United States criminal justice system, and it still exists in modern society. So the Reform era or Reformation era of policing occurred from the 1930s to the 1970s, and this is where police systems and the way in which officers and policing occurred was decentralized. And this is where corruption ended though. So within this era, people of color, they were becoming more prominent in policing. It wasn't a lot, but they were welcomed and they could apply for the job, but they still faced multiple restrictions and discrimination. For example, Black officers could not work with white officers, arrest white suspects, and more. And in this era, the role of police officers as protectors and crime fighters emerged. They seemed as like superheroes. Now you're here, you're gonna protect me, I can call you and you're gonna come. And this essentially occurred because there was a separation of the social work and emergency service facilities and activities. So before, it was all together, it was included. And this is where 911, the number 911, emerged during this reform era of policing. Police cars also became more prominent, and undercover officers were also established with this reform era of policing. The creation of the 911 and other collaborative or community policing efforts were successful in this era to establishing and fostering community relationships between citizens and officers. However, in the reform era, this presence also resulted in corruption and discrimination occurring because, as I said, Black officers weren't allowed to arrest white suspects. So let's say they saw a white suspect commit a crime. If they tried to arrest that suspect, the Black officer themselves could potentially get in trouble, or they could face backlash from their white coworkers for arresting a white suspect who was probably guilty of a crime. However, despite all these practices and the different eras of policing, the reform era showed that rules and regulations that police officers follow and adhere to are based on a social and cultural norms and what is deemed acceptable by society. So this essentially means that if society deemed it acceptable for people who committed robbery not to be arrested, that was the law. It was okay. They didn't arrest people who committed robbery. That's not a fact, guys. I'm just throwing that out there as an example. So society and cultural norms deemed what type of laws emerge. It's not like modern day where we have a list of laws saying, okay, if you commit this crime, for sure you will be arrested, or for sure you will be punished. It depended on like what the cultural norms were like in that state, or perhaps specific jurisdiction. The Bronx and Brooklyn could have had different laws. California and New York could have had different laws.